This is Literary Landscapes, and today we are interviewing Katharine Tucker, the up-and-coming author of Winter's Fire. She's an incredibly exciting and intelligent individual, and I cannot wait to get my hands on her book. I don't think I could do much more of an introduction, but Katharine, would you like to take it away and tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's amazing to be on here, and thank you for inviting me. So I'm Katharine, Kat for short, and I am currently working on my first novel called Winter's Fire. As Elena said, it is a epic fantasy. It's the first installment of a trilogy that I hope to publish in the coming years. It's multiple POV, and it follows several characters as they kind of work their way through a dystopian fantasy world, searching for lost magical power.
This is absolutely fantastic. I absolutely love big adventure. I've read some of the best books ever, and I just absolutely fall into it. And I know years later, I'm thinking, oh, that book was so good. I really want to go back, and I'm absolutely sure this is going to be like that. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions and go through, and I think the first question I want to ask you was, what was your inspiration for Winter's Fire going into this?
I don't really know.
No.
So I am not a plotter. I write quite organically. So the first kind of startings of Winter's Fire came into my head in about 2015. It's 5 years ago. Random characters would walk in and out of my brain, and then I suddenly was like writing scenes, and they were kind of sticking together in some sort of like roughly chronological timeline, and kind of took a little bit of a hold, and I started writing. I've always written since a child, so it's kind of, I'm used to this sort of like
very much in your
blood kind of approach. I guess like it's just, I took inspiration from things I've read, people I've seen on the street. Some of my characters are just from, I just like really like someone's aesthetic, or not really famous people, just people that I see on the street and have just like a weird quirk about them. Films, nothing in particular, but just sometimes like the vibes, music, themes, that kind of stuff, and they sort of all just merged into one hot mess that I'm now making into a story.
I mean, I think there's a real talent to that. I'm a great believer, and I'll probably say it a million times, of whatever you create is a product of your environment, a product of yourself. So in a weird way, everyone says, oh, I plotted out a novel, and that's fine. But we are pantsers at heart. Like, our whole experience informs it. And definitely, I would argue, I'm a little bit more of a plotter, that I have definitely thrown in this scene and that scene and that scene. And I've kind of done exactly the same thing. But I don't think I'm brave enough to say that I'm absolutely flying by the seat of my pants and it's amazing. And actually, it can mean the twists and turns, it's not predictable and very step by step, because definitely I've read books where I'm like, I know what's going to happen because you planned it out. But if no one knows what's going to happen as we go and as we develop, it can only be spontaneous.
I think that's a good way to describe how Winter's Fire's come about. I roughly know where it's going, but the journey there is a total mystery to me.
No, that's all right. You mentioned you were writing from quite a young age. When did you start writing?
Since I could pick up a pen. I don't really have a moment where I started writing being like, Mummy, I want to write. I just know that I've done it. There's films of me when I'm about 5 or 6 writing a story, like they're picture books. But yeah, like I've done it since I could pick up a pen pretty much.
Yeah. So always a
part of my psyche.
No, that's good. I mean, I think all great writers are story creators in all things. And something I picked up on is you mentioning sort of seeing someone's aesthetic on the street and really like expanding that out. I don't necessarily think that everyone can do that. And I think that's a really cool thing. And sometimes you end up playing the game of, I wonder what their life is like. But it's kind of a little bit more when you think, I wonder what their life could be in this whole world and this whole thing. And also, I do think pulling from experience, it does build a little bit more of, I guess, authenticity into your characters, because you're like, that person actually exists in some weird way. But yeah, no, that's okay. That's good.
Especially like having a visual, either if it's just a memory or whether it's a picture or something of that person, really helps me to just put them onto the page, because there's no way I'm going to like go off and one moment give them auburn hair and the next moment red hair or something like this. I know exactly what they look like.
That's a really strong image. I, for ages, have really struggled to be like, I don't know what they're just floating heads room to room. Like that's, but to actually have a real aesthetic and think, and really, I imagine you can probably paint images and scenes in your mind. And it's one of those things you almost wish you were an incredible painter, because you'd rather like paint these beautiful scenes that you described.
I've tried.
It's
not been great. No.
No.
I'm not going to be doing fine art anytime soon. But
No.
I want to put them down on paper.
Having such a detailed like image in your head, though, it's got to translate to page and be able to sort of really use potentially very harsh language, potentially very romantic language, to really put that down on page. And that can really be a joy, especially in epic fantasy. That's the creme de la creme of what you're really looking for.
I love it. Yeah, I think that's the reason why I love reading epic fantasy, especially like the scenery. Like, you can just go wild. You can make snowdrifts big as a house, and waterfalls that, you know, like fall onto 5 layers, and all of this, you know, cities in clouds and all sorts of stuff that can just go as big as you want, which is just amazing on a world building kind of platform.
I definitely feel like when I watch something like Star Wars, and that's more of a space opera rather than the high fantasy, but I definitely feel like I'm like, oh, I'd really love to live in that world. And when you read high fantasy, you're like, oh, I want a little house on the edge of that like gorgeous waterfall, and you want to think about your garden and everything. So we mentioned that you get inspiration from your environment and from people. What about music?
The music kind of works both ways. So there will be parts of the music where I will listen to something and a scene will just be in my head. I have like a very tiny burgeoning project that came out of some random Muse track that I heard just like years ago, and in my head I just had this vision of a girl with a fiery sword, and I have like that in the back of my head that's just always like pottering around when I'm writing Winter's Fire. And so that works in the way of inspiration that way, but it also works when I've already got an idea. So I have like playlists that I listen to because I've heard the music and been like, that is a great piece of music to write whilst I'm writing X, Y, and Z, or this like really reflects this character. And if I want to just kind of get in the mood for writing, I'll listen to that music. So it sort of works both ways of like the inspiration.
That's really, really good. I want to ask you the question, how do you write as a pantser? Break it down for me.
I would say I think the first thing with pantsing is I get massive imposter syndrome, because all over the internet, there are people telling you how to plot books. There are books on plotting books. YouTube videos, blogs, templates, and every single published writer seems to be a plotter. and I just can't do it. I have tried planning, and I can plan. I'm quite good at planning. I just don't stick to it. I'll veer off halfway through the plan, because my first draft is where I get through a lot of bad ideas, but I get a lot of good ideas. It's where I get to learn who my characters are. I do it through the mode of writing. The dialogue, I'll just be like, oh, of course she would say that. Whereas I don't maybe necessarily know that before I've written that specific bit of dialogue.
That sounds very natural, that like saying, oh, of course she says that, meaning it fits their character, and actually you get a good sense of what their character is like. And I think that's really, really valuable to have.
I think it kind of comes from, I'm not very sort of eloquent at putting my ideas down on a bit of paper. So when someone says, what's like, I don't know, one of my characters, Asa from Winter's Fire, what's she like? And I'm like, I don't know. And like filling in like character bios and stuff is just so difficult, because I don't necessarily know it, but I just know that when I'm writing a dialogue, she just either wouldn't say that or would say that.
Yeah,
which is a bit bizarre. It's quite organic, I think.
I definitely think there's something to say about the filling out in the bios. Like sometimes they'll ask, do they have brothers and sisters and things like that, and just what is their favorite food and things like that. But if it doesn't appear in the book, and the idea is to help you build a more richer character, but when you have such a stark idea in your head of, no, I know exactly what this person's going to be, it doesn't matter if they necessarily have siblings, unless the siblings are a feature of this book, because unless they're going to have middle child syndrome, because that you talked about, it's not important. So I think having a very stark image makes a stronger person and stronger character to read.
I do kind of create bios as I go along. So I'll be writing and something will occur and I'll be like, that's something like a phrase that I can reuse again and again as sort of like an identifier for that person. So I write that kind of thing down in a bio, but I'm not one of these huge book Bible people. Like, I love those people. I think they are insanely amazing and I worship them. I can't do it.
No, that's okay. You're expanding into your own style, and I think frankly it can make an authentic thing, definitely. I guess to throw you a little bit of a curveball, are there any specific themes or ideas that kind of carry through your book?
I think the main theme is power in the book. The world has lost all its magic. And the 4 characters that you're following in the POVs are all searching for power of some sort. So they're searching for magical power, but they're also searching for sort of personal power, political power, sort of freedom from the patriarchy and things like that, and trying to grab onto something. And one of like the running themes of the trilogy, I'm hoping it will sort of come out, is what it means to have power and who should have it and who should make that decision about who has power. And I think it's something that just has played on my mind through sort of my teens and my 20s, just in the current political landscape of people coming into power and what they're doing with it and those decisions that are being made with it. I think that's kind of just fed intrinsically into this.
Yeah. I mean, I can see you've got a bit of like cross genre to a certain extent, the sort of epic fantasy with bits of political. I mean, obviously we've seen the great success of the Game of Thrones, and of course, like there's a massive amount of that people enjoy, because it's not just about the fantasy, it's about the games that get played. So I definitely think I would welcome another political fantasy. I imagine yours is less gory. Please feel free to correct me.
There's some gore.
Oh my god. Just a touch, that's okay.
Yeah, no, there's probably a little bit less than Game of Thrones. But yeah, no, there's a decent amount. Okay. I like a good battle and a fight scene. So and 2 of the characters are warriors, so you know.
Okay, so a healthy dose of action and excitement and
impaling. Yeah.
Oh yeah, everyone loves that. That sounds great. That's really positive. I guess to ask a slightly more personal question, do your family and your friends support you? Do they read your stuff, that kind of thing?
I guess I only really started talking seriously about my writing about 2 years ago. So I've only really talked seriously about it and let people know that that's what I do since in my 30s, basically. Okay. My parents have always known I've done it. I mean, I was doing it as a 6-year-old. They were recording me on video doing it. So they've always known, but they've kind of seen it as like a nice little hobby. But in the last couple of years, I really wanted to, like, as Winter's Fire kind of grew and grew and my passion and hard work for it grew and grew, I want to be a published writer. So my mum has started to read my book, but I'm a bit terrified because there's sex scenes.
Oh, you're so brave! You're so brave!
Like, oh, can I let my mum read the book?
No, I've just said, no, we're going to have a fade to black. We're going to have a fade to black, because I'm like, I can't imagine that my mum reading that. You're braver than us all. I cannot believe it.
I know. So my mum's read the start of the book that I have now scrapped because I have totally killed my darling and decided to scrap the first scene I ever wrote for Winter's Fire in favour of something else. But she's like, oh, can I read the rest of the book? So I'm like, oh, I might have to delete some of it.
Just give her an edited copy.
Like, redacted. Just
a whole bit. And it was like, and then they went to bed. Great sleep. It was very restful.
Door closed.
Door closed.
So, but then I've got a few friends who've read it as well. A couple of ex-colleagues have read in like very like previous versions. So I'm becoming more out there with telling people I write. I used to be very embarrassed and shy about it.
I think that's really familiar, I suppose. Definitely, I think having the drive to say, I want to be a published author. And I don't necessarily think there should be a stigma around it. It's not like saying, I'd like to go to Mars like next week. It's something people do. It's something people make great livings out of, and not necessarily even meager livings. Very great successful authors. I remember seeing a Twitter post about a successful author, and she said her statement of success is she's able to go out and feed her ducks in her dressing gown at 10 a.m. And I was like, yes.
Oh, that was Robin Hobb.
Oh, that was sweet. And I thought, that is success. It's small success in like your worldview, but it is success, and it is something that you really drive after. And I mean, I laughed when I was explaining it to, I again had a very similar experience, sort of mentioned a couple bits of how I'd like to write to my parents, and my dad's whole thing was, however much I hate this word, Ilona is going on a journey, which I thought was really entertaining, because I was explaining the editing process and the like getting a literary agent and publishing and things like that. I suppose on a similar topic, have you thought about how you want to go about that? Are you looking at traditional publishing, sort of ebooks, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so I really want to go down the traditional route, just because that's like the dream.
Yeah, that makes sense. I agree.
You know, to have that amount of support from professionals is incredible. And I would love to see my book in bookshelves and libraries and everything. I don't necessarily think I've got the skills to make a real good success of a self-published book. But if the trad route doesn't pay off, then I'll definitely consider it, because I've put in so much work and passion into Winter's Fire. I feel like the end product will be good enough to publish.
I think that's good, because it's a bit like painting a painting, and it's a shame that when you paint a painting, you don't get the opportunity to at least put it up online if you don't sell it. But at the very least, when you create a novel, you're thinking, yes, even if the literary agent doesn't necessarily like it, or frankly, you just don't happen to find the literary agent that likes it, because it might have been, I mean, it's the ridiculous thing, they might have retired 20 years ago, and you suddenly realize, oh, okay, this is just not right for right now. Putting it up on ebook is a great alternative. Yes, it is much more difficult to get it published and sort of get it, make a lot of money on it. But I see your point about wanting to go traditional publishing. I'm very much the same. It's the first person who's kind of, this is their job to judge quality, who actually evaluates it and says, yeah, this is pretty good. And however much I want my fiance, my friends, and my parents to love this book, they'll probably love it, or they at least love me regardless. But this person does not need to love you. They don't even need to like your book. They do not need to like anything. So
judgment in the cold light of day, I crave it.
Yeah. That's good. That's great though. It means you're brave. It means you believe in your work. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely go up and down with that belief. There's some days where I'm like, what is this pile of crap? And then there's some days where I'm like, I could do this. I could actually do this, those are nice days.
Yeah. I think it's important to remember those days and acknowledging the rubbish days and kind of concentrating on, because 3, 4, 5 years down the line, if you are, whether you're doing something totally different or you're on your 3rd book tour of book 3, whatever you're doing, you will remember those days and think, I had no idea what I was thinking about. And on both ends, I had no idea how much this was going to be a success and how much it didn't matter when it felt like it sucked. So I think acknowledgement of those days is absolutely fine. So yeah,
I think it's really nice as well when you see other published, best-selling authors talk about exactly the same thing. I think I saw Hafsa Faisal talk about it on Instagram, and she was just like, I still get imposter syndrome and still don't really know what I'm doing, and I'm on my 3rd book. This is ridiculous. And I was just like, hallelujah. Someone who is on the New York Times bestseller list still doesn't know what they're doing, and that's really good.
Yeah, I think imposter syndrome exists across the industry, both in writing and outside of it. But yeah, it's really nice to meet someone who has either a much better job than you, is much higher, or someone who's achieved really your dream of being published and being successful, to say, it's okay that you don't know what you're doing. That's absolutely fine. And I think, that's kind of what I'm trying to accomplish here as well, in sort of doing this YouTube channel, Literary Landscapes, is to kind of give an opportunity for smaller creators and sort of, I suppose, pre-best-selling authors and early ones to kind of say to future people who will watch this thinking Kat Tucker went on to sell hundreds of thousands of books and she still felt like this, and that's completely normal. And I know that it might feel far-fetched, I suppose, to begin with, but you really there's no point aiming low. Like there's no point aiming low. You have to aim high. And I think what you're doing is like really good. I can see you've spent a lot of time going through and editing and everything. And now you're sending out to beta readers and everything. And I think you're going to get a lot of feedback, like really good feedback back. I'm excited to actually just take your like book, put it on my Kindle actually, and just read it for the first time, like not edit it, nothing to begin with, and just read it. And I am very much excited to come back to you in like 2, 3, 4 days to go, this is what I think of this book. And obviously that's the world's scariest thing. Like that is an incredibly scary thing, but it's something I'm looking forward to, which I think if anyone's excited to read your book, and a lot of that, it's not necessarily come from your writing, because I haven't seen much of your writing before. It comes from you. And so I think a big part of you and your brand as an author is you've always been very good at pushing other authors up. You can see it on Twitter, you can see it on Instagram. And I think that's a really valuable quality to have in a writer, because it's
very important to do, to support other writers. Like we're all in the same boat together. Like we're all sitting there unpublished or self-published and thinking, am I good enough? Am I doing the right thing? And I joined the Twitter writing community in 2018 and I haven't looked back. And it's been one of the biggest motivators for me to finish my novel, to start reading more about the craft of writing. I wasn't doing a huge amount of that before. It's given me the confidence to talk about my writing to people around me, whether it's strangers or family or friends. Like a lot of like my close friends didn't even know I wrote.
Yeah.
And like we're talking about people I've known for like 20 years. It's just been massive to me. So I think it's just so important in that, and the IG community as well. I've only been on that for 2 months and oh my god, it's just phenomenal. Like the amount of support and love for each other there. I always use as an example when people say social media is like horrible. I'm just like, you need to use the writing community hashtag.
I've been really, really impressed with the kind of little microcosm it can exist in. And I think something I've been really impressed with as well is it's supportive without necessarily saying yes to every good and bad idea. It's kind of, a lot of the bad ideas kind of just get ignored and pushed forward, but it's really nice when people ask questions. And I've definitely had a lot of my questions answered and I'm like, wait, I can't remember, like, what does this mean and what does that mean? And it's been really nice not just to Google it, actually to have an opinion. And I've made friends through Twitter, which has been really, really nice, and really like it has inspired me to write a little bit more of my book and take part in writing sprints and things like that. You are definitely worth someone following on Twitter and Instagram, and I think everyone should, and they will be down in the description. I guess the last little question I wanted to ask you was, what was your experience like creating your author website? Was it easy, difficult? Did you enjoy it? Was there any like tips or tricks you wanted to add?
I really enjoyed it. I'm a total technophobe. Like I'm like notoriously bad. So I went into it a bit nervous because I was just like, I have to go on the internet. But I went for WordPress. There's quite a lot out there that will do more for you. Like you don't have to go into the nitty gritty. But WordPress kind of gives you a bit of, well, to me, in my very novice ways, but to me it felt like WordPress gave you a bit more flexibility to grow it if you wanted to grow it, to add more things on and that kind of thing. So I went for WordPress and I was warned that it was quite complicated. I found it quite simple. Quite straightforward. It really talks you through it, and if there was anything that didn't make sense, there's a huge help section for it. So it's just like,
yeah, no, that's really positive. And I've seen your website and I've gone through it, and it's one of the only like websites or author websites I've seen that are created that doesn't feel sparse, because sometimes, especially the Squarespace and the Weebly and stuff, it can feel very, very sparse, but it's definitely got a lot of your personality and everything in. Again, that will be down in the description for people to check out. Thank you so much for joining me. This is Literary Landscapes. I am Ilona Thomas. Thank you for joining us. Bye.